What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another lesson. I'm your instructor, Torbjorn. You're watching Going from Zero to Producer in 90 Days with Ableton Live. So without further ado, let's get going. Today, the lesson's going to be all about making a simple hip-hop beat using the Ableton instrument called Simpler. Quickly review what we talked about in our last lesson. We were using some construction kits, some pre-made loops and instruments and stuff to put everything together in the session view of Ableton. And then we were recording that to the arrange screen using all the different play and stop buttons that you get in the session view. And then we were doing some quick edit tricks to spice up our recorded arrangement. We were using some audio effects to spice up some of those sounds. And then we dived into automation a little bit, how you can draw some lines so you can change the parameters of your sounds and your sound effects and cause sounds to change their sound quality over time. Well, let's talk about samples. Digging for samples is like an age-old thing, as you can see in this picture here that I've pulled up of this guy with this massive record collection. Historically, people would use a record player, they would use a MIDI production center or an MPC to record little pieces of those samples. You'd be digging through records forever and ever to find just the right kick drum or just the right snare drum. That's all good, but we've got lots of tools here at our disposal that make that stuff a lot easier now. First of all, we don't have to dig nearly as hard as people used to find the right sounds. And in fact, within reason, we actually don't even have to pay for them necessarily because there's lots of free resources out there. First and foremost, I want to bring freesound.org to your attention. 15 years of Creative Commons sounds being made available to the public on this website. You have to create a free account up at the top, but after that, you've got access to download all of this awesome library of music. I found this little jazz piano sound here that I liked a lot. Great vibe on that. You can imagine a chopped up version of this in a hip hop beat somewhere. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to look into that technique in just a little bit. So we found one that you want. You click on the link and it'll open up with a page here. And if you're logged into your account, you can just click the download button. Sometimes their file names are a little funky, but you'll see that it'll show up in your downloads and it should be pretty straightforward. That's freesound.org. Another great resource here is looperman.com. Same type of deal. You got to make a free profile, but once you make a free profile, you can dig through, search for key terms, search for genres, search for different instruments, and just hit a play button until you find something that you like. Let's see. I ended up going for this Hip Hop Drums 7, Ready or Not. Mr. Mursky. Shout out to Mr. Mursky for uploading this. The reason that I chose this is because we're going to chop up this drum loop a little bit later. And if you actually listen to this, you can hear that at different points in the beat, without any sounds overlapping the way that they wrote it, you get a kick drum isolated, a hi-hat isolated, and you get a snare drum, isolated. So because we have all these sounds separate, it'll be way easier for us to chop them up later on. Same kind of deal, click the download button. It'll pop over here for you in the actual web page for that specific sound. Click download, and it will pop up down here in your downloads folder. Now, Splice is another really great resource. This one is not free. It comes with a free trial, but the sounds section is really what we want. And how you get access to their sounds is by paying for a subscription. I believe it's either $7 a month or $10 a month or something like that. And they give you a number of credits, and then those credits are used, 1 credit for 1 download of a sample, or I believe if you download like synthesizer presets, we'll dive into instruments like Serum and Massive in future lessons. Those ones, I think, because you kind of get more with a preset, I think they charge you 3 credits for these. But regardless, it's like 500 or 700 credits a month that you get. You can imagine how many samples you're downloading. That's a lot of music. So we just go to the sounds category here of the Splice website, search for some sounds. You've got some extra search things by genre, by BPM, by key, by instrument, all that useful stuff. I went down here, I was searching for an upright bass sample, and I found this one. And you can tell that it's got like a keyboard sound in there as well, but one of those notes, one of those bass notes, you get it in isolation without any other sounds. So I can imagine that we are just going to take that one little piece of that sample and we're going to make a new bass line out of it. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to hit use one credit, hit the download button, make sure that I've got my Splice app opened so that it knows where to sync. Make sure I press the right button here. Splice. Open up the Splice app. Let's try that one more time. Now I've got my Splice window here. I'm going to hit the download button, switch back over to Splice, and then on my recently added thing, it just updated this new little sample. I can even listen to it right here from the Splice app. That's cool. Definitely lots of sample digging is, the whole culture of making hip hop music is digging for that perfect sample, getting that perfect snare drum, getting that perfect kick drum, finding that perfect little piano lick. And like I said before, historically, people used to go through record stores and listen to dozens and dozens of vinyl records to find that one special thing to sample. And it's so cool in 2020 or whatever year it is when you're watching this video, that we've got access to these awesome resources and we can just skip straight ahead pretty much to the creative part. Well, before we dive into Ableton, it bears mentioning that if you're not finding the sounds that you want on these 3 websites, there's many more. Google search is usually the way to go, searching for things like free samples, free drum kits, free hip hop loops, free EDM loops, free insert whatever genre you're making. There's loops of rock music and metal music and classical music and you name it. Lots of free resources out there. And when people say it's a free download, they usually just mean that they're gonna ask for you to give them your email address or your contact information. And I've made a fake Gmail account that I sign up for all of this stuff so that my normal email doesn't get spammed. Well, that's cool. Some great ways that you can find loops and samples online for free. I think it's time now that we dig into Ableton Simpler a little bit. So Simpler is an instrument that comes with Ableton. It's called Simpler because the type of instrument is a sampler, but they do a few things that just make things easy for you with this instrument. It makes it a little more simpler, than a sampler. Because it's a software instrument, it's going to be placed on a MIDI track instead of an audio track. The last 2 lessons, we've been only messing around with audio tracks and loops. And while we technically could grab this piano loop that we downloaded, or we could grab that drum loop that we downloaded and use it as an audio track, we want to have more finite control of the ways that we can customize that. And Simpler is going to give us that control. So here, just as an example, I've made a Simpler instrument. I've dragged it onto a MIDI track, and I've dragged a piano sample, just a single note, into Simpler. I'm going to right-click and normalize that so it's a little louder. Hopefully that'll be a little easier to hear. I'm just pressing the button on my keyboard, the A key, and because up here I've got my little MIDI keyboard turned on, I don't actually have a keyboard set up here plugged into Ableton or a push controller setup or anything. I'm just using my computer keyboard. A, W, S, E, D, they're like the keys on the piano. And if you play a couple of them together, jazzy chords. Well, that's all cool, but before we start getting too crazy, if you're someone like me and you know a little bit about music theory and you know just a little bit about scales and you want to choose the right chords or make sure that your notes from one instrument match the next one, we're going to want to double check the tuning. So we'll go over here to our audio effects in our browser, scroll all the way down here to tuner. We're going to drag that, and then we're just going to press our A key on our keyboard. And what we want to see is the letter C. The note C is what, ironically, the A key on your keyboard should be playing. And so we press this button here, and we can see that this natural piano note is actually an F. So if we go into our controls, we've got some transpose options here. We can go up or down. So I'm not changing the note that I'm hitting on my keyboard. I'm just changing the transpose on the instrument. We're able to make that go up the scale, down the scale. So I'm just going to go all the way up until we get a C. Now I'm playing the C key on my piano or on my keyboard, and it's playing the C note on the instrument. We can change our octaves around with the X and Z key on the keyboard. We can try that chord again. Sounds kind of funny when you pitch it up, or when you pitch it way down. Sounds kind of funny too. What it's doing to change the pitch of the note is it's changing actually the speed that the note is playing back at. Ableton and Simpler, more specifically, has this super powerful button here called Warp. When we turn that on, you can see we get some grid lines here telling us like beats and bars. And you'll notice now that when I change the pitch, the speed does not change anymore. Though if we pitch it up a bunch, we might get some kind of glitchy sounds, and sometimes that's cool, depending on the music that you're making. But the important thing is that warp will get rid of that situation where changing the pitch also changes the speed. Sometimes you want to turn that off, gives you kind of a vinyl record effect, or an old school MPC effect, but we're just going to keep warp on for now. So we've checked the tuning. It bears mentioning that we're playing this here in classic mode, which means that we've got our basic attack, decay, sustain, and release controls are what come with classic. Really, we don't need to dive super deep into that. Turn the attack up and your note will fade in. Or turn your release up, and when you let go of the note on your keyboard, it will fade out. The longer the release is, the longer it takes to fade out, etc. There's lots of stuff with those settings that we will dive into in future videos, but those are the two important ones for now. A different mode is one shot. Over here, we've got these three different buttons. So if we click on one shot, now the rules kind of change a little bit. So instead of having attack, decay, sustain, and release, the note is just always going to play all the way through as soon as we hit a button. So even though I'm just doing a very short tap of the key, it's going to play through the entire audio file all the way through. This is really great for drums and percussion sounds. So if we were to put like a kick or a snare in there, let's go to our clips and let's search for a kick drum. Kind of cool. We can just click and drag a new sound in there and it replaces it. The reason that you would want to just press the button once and have it play all the way through is like in real life, a drum, if you hit a drum, it's going to resonate regardless of if you keep the stick pushed down or if you, whatever you do after you hit the drum. This is just kind of mimicking that. Also for 808s, long bass sounds, this can be a great thing because you don't necessarily find the right sample here. You don't necessarily want to have to hold that button down the whole time. Sometimes you do, and if you do, classic mode is good to go. But if you want to just press the button once and have the whole sample play, one shot is great. Now, what I want to dig into a little more than classic mode and a little more than one shot is like really, shout out Jonathan Gilmore, definitely needs more gold microphones. And it needs more lasers, as our friend Cameron would say. But really, let's get back to the task at hand here. Really what I want to dig into and what makes this a powerful tool is the slice mode. So as you recall, we've grabbed some samples here that we downloaded. We got this piano sound. I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag that right from the bar. Command tab or Alt tab if you're on PC. And I'm still dragging that file, and I'm just going to drop it right in the sampler. drop it right in the sampler and click the slice mode. You'll see now we get a bunch of different buttons here, a bunch of different lines here that is like slicing up our sound. So let's listen to now if we were to press all of the buttons on our keyboard. Instead of repitching the note, it's just going to play a different piece of this. I'll right click here and normalize volumes again, just so we get it to be as loud as it can be. So that's really cool. I think it's slicing it up a little bit more than I want. So I'm going to go here to this thing that says sensitivity. We're currently at a 100%, and I'm just going to start dragging that down until we have less slices. So that's cool. Maybe it's a little bit too few. Let's drag it back up and get a few extra ones in there. There's definitely some cool pieces in here. I like that first chord. We get, if we click and drag here with our mouse, you see we've got like a little magnifying glass icon. If you get close enough to one of those samples, you can actually move those slices around by clicking and dragging on them. Or if you double click, it'll get rid of them. So I definitely like that better, like that. We can double click to add a new one as well. That's great. That one's cool. Let's just add a couple more in here. I can live without that one. All right, so we've got some options here. Now we're going to go up and we're going to double click here. We're going to zoom out on our clip view. Double clicking is just going to add a clip, and let's just turn our headphone button on here. What does Ableton actually call that? Our MIDI editor preview. So we'll turn that little blue headphone icon on, and then we're just going to Command D, move our note over, and press the up key. And that way we'll be able to easily hear each one of those slices. All right, and now if we play this clip back, we don't have any drums or any other instruments, so we'll just use the metronome to give us some timing information for now. And let's see if we can like recontextualize how this sounds musically. Pretty cool. Definitely too fast. Let's hit the times. Let's select everything here. Click and drag to select all our notes. And let's hit the ×2 button. And let's just go down here to our length and click and drag that number 1 up to 2. Now let's hear it with it a little slower. That's all pretty good. I don't like that first note. So in order to skip it, we're just going to move everything up 1 semitone. And now that first slice that was associated here with our C key is going to be gone. That's kind of cool. We can rearrange some of those notes later, but let's just leave that there for now. Just a simple way that we were able to totally change that piano sound up. All right, I'm going to go to the Create tab. I'm going to insert a new MIDI track. And now if I look at my device view where it says drop an instrument or a sample here, that's where I'm going to drop this next loop that we downloaded. It was a drum loop, I believe. Grab it from our browser, drag it into the spot, and it automatically creates a simpler instrument for us. Same thing with the drums here. We're going to go down to slice mode. Maybe mess with our sensitivity a little bit. We could probably keep it all the way up. It looks like it sliced it pretty good. Maybe move one or two of our slices, get rid of one so that kick drum can be a bit longer. That's great. And I believe over here somewhere, yeah, we got a kick drum that doesn't have a hi-hat on it. All right, so let's create a new clip here. We're double clicking in a blank space, going back down to our C octave 1. There's our kick drum with a hi-hat. Next to it is a hi-hat on its own. Next to that is a snare. And here I think that G1 was our kick drum with no hi-hat. Just important to know in case we want to have some accent kick drums. A real drummer wouldn't necessarily hit the hi-hat every time they hit the kick drum. All right, so kick, snare, we can pretty confidently put our snare on beat 2. Put our hi-hat, we can duplicate, hold the Alt key, or if you're on a PC, I believe you click and hold the Control key to copy those hi-hats over. And we'll do the same thing with the snare. I'm just gonna click on this kick drum and press the 0 key so that it mutes it for now, because we're gonna figure out where to put that accent kick drum here in just a second. Awesome. Now we're starting to get some musical context from this. Hi-hat, snare, hi-hat. I think we need another kick drum. Maybe we can do our accent kick drums here. I like to do this if we actually right-click and take this 16th grid and make it a little bit smaller. It can be kind of cool to do some offbeat kick drums. Let's try that. Grab a little extra hi-hat there for the offbeat part. And then I think this can be a kick drum with a hi-hat. Starting to sound pretty groovy, right? Some like lo-fi study and chill. I'm ready to have this beat on that YouTube channel with the anime girl that has been studying nonstop for the last 5 years. Another thing that can be really cool is if you right-click and turn your triplet grid on, you'll get some different grid lines that represent a 3/4 rhythm. And if that sounds like French to you, all you got to know is that it can be a cool way to add some swing to your drums. So if you're trying to do those little accent kicks, or if we were to try to do an accent snare, it can be a really cool thing to just find that triplet grid and just drag it off the grid a little bit, just because it kind of sounds funky and wonky and gives it some of that soul and some of that vibe. So we've got a weird out-of-time accented kick here, and we've got a weird out-of-time accented hi-hat. And let's hear if it sounds tight. I'm vibing with this already. What do you guys think? I'm seeing a woo in the chat room. I'm seeing some hearts come up. Pretty fun. I'm having fun with this. We've got one more sound that I want to experiment with, and that is that bass sound. So we're going to create one new MIDI track. I'm going to go ahead and pull up. We grabbed this one off of Splice. And just to show you the example of how easy Splice is, it's just like your folder or your Finder. Make sure we're looking at the device view here. All you got to do is just click and drag it, just like any other file. It'll create a simpler instrument for you. And if I remember correctly, let's see if I can play this back at the right octave. That's right. We got that one bass note right in here that just plays by itself. So if we want to isolate that note, that's really easy. We can do this in classic mode, or we can do this in one-shot mode. You get a little flag here on the left side, and you get a little flag here on the right side. All you got to do is just drag that over to where you want the sample to start. We can click and drag to zoom right into that spot. You may notice that there's a little center line here in on a really detailed, like, who cares? Probably only the producers really noticed. But it is worth finding the point where your line that represents your audio file perfectly intersects with that 0 line, because you will avoid having any weird clicks or popping sounds. Double click with the magnifying glass to zoom all the way out. Let's grab that flag over here on the right side and just drag that over to where our sample is going to end. So it looks like we kind of get 2 notes here, and I don't really want that. So we got to get rid of this. That sounds pretty good. We can fade it out a little bit by dragging this fade out knob up, and you'll see that it starts to gray out part of the end there. Nice. That sounds good. I like that. Same thing as before. We want to just double check our tuning. Audio effects, tuner, press the C key on your keyboard. That one is actually a D, so we're just going to transpose it down, 2 semitones. Now we're playing a C. You can see on this tuner that it actually, you want it to be perfectly in that little center dot. You can see that it says we're about 7 cents short of that. So if we go over here to our controls, go to this detune thing, we can push that up +7. Maybe we'll drop it down to 6. Give or take 1 or 2, but that puts us perfectly in tune, and that's going to be important when we're combining multiple different samples. You never know if someone recorded this and they were out of tune, or they recorded it maybe on like a tape player or something like that makes the pitch kind of weird. Maybe it was a sample that came off a vinyl record. You just never know, and part of what comes with us having all these free resources and all of this technology is kind of an unspoken expectation that the quality is going to be really high. And so tuning is a great way that you can make sure that that quality is right. And it looks like that C is in tune with our piano as well. So we'll just double click here to add a new clip. And I'm actually going to cheat here a little bit. I'm going to go here and I'm going to select all of our kick drum notes from our drums. If you click on the key all the way to the left on the piano roll, it'll select all of them. I'm just going to Command copy or Control copy if you're on Windows. And now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to click at the very beginning and I'm going to Command paste. And now it's going to copy over the exact same rhythm that our kick drum was playing. And so now every time a kick drum hits, that bass note should play. Let's just make sure. We'll actually need to shift this up an octave. So I'm going to select all of the notes that we just pasted on the bass. You can use your arrow keys to move it up or down in pitch, or if you hold the shift key, it'll pitch it up a whole octave. I think that C3 region is the same note as the original sample. I kind of like that really pitched down one, but since this is more of like a lo-fi hip-hop thing, we probably don't need all that bass. I'm going to keep it at C3. Let's take a listen. Nice. That's playing in time. We've got a groove with our drums. It sounds a little repetitive though. Over here on the left, we've got our clip parameters for this MIDI clip that has these bass notes in it. And I'm just going to hit this duplicate loop. All it's going to do is take our 1 bar loop that we started with, and it's going to duplicate it and make it twice as long. So now the same thing plays twice, but because it's 2 different bars, we can change a note and it won't repeat that same note the same way every time. So we could take this C, we can move it up to a G. Then we get kind of like a little bit of a chord progression. Maybe this C here can go down to an A. Let's do this first one as a G, and then we'll do the octave on the end. We could even take that high note that's kind of poking out a little bit too loud, and down here on the bottom, we could grab the velocity of it. We could turn that velocity down a little bit. Let's say they were all at 100 to start, so maybe we'll just take this one down to like 60, somewhere around there. Awesome. And now with 3 clips, we were able to recontextualize those clips. We were able to recontextualize those clips. We were able to use the simpler instrument to create new sounds using the classic, the one-shot, and the slice mode. And we were able to put them all together, tune them so that they sounded like they were playing the same scales and the same notes. We were able to arrange a beat. If we wanted to do this now and make an actual beat out of it, the same thing that we did in the last video applies. We just got to hit the arrangement record button. Switch over here to our arrangement screen with the tab key, and we can see that it's recording our beat out for us in the order that we played it. And then when we want to listen to it back, we just got to make sure that we hit our back to arrangement button, little orange button that pops up in the corner. Your tracks will all light up to let you know that this is where the sound is coming from. And there you go. Using Simpler to make a simple hip hop beat. Happy producing. Big thanks again to Ableton for free trial, 90 days of Ableton Live. Make sure you head over to ableton.com and cop that free software. Follow along with these tutorials. And if you're making beats and if this stuff is helpful, send me a DM. I would love to hear what you're working on. See you guys next time. Peace out.